Howdy, welcome to Ausgrave Royalty. I am Justin. Another video. This one should be shorter than usual, but for this kind of wild card video, I wanted to talk about my experience with not only listening to music, but making music. I have my SoundCloud link in the description. And, I mention it a lot, and not because I want any particular kind of attention to it. It's more of just a conversation starter for other musicians out there. Kind of about what y'all's experience has been composing original work and like the inner resources you've had to summon and manifest to be able to make things happen. Like, what's your creative process and all that stuff? That's what I'm mostly curious about. And I'll articulate my experience with all that in a moment here. But I got into making music long time ago. Maybe 2012. I could check my SoundCloud, but it's whenever Unknown Arcade Hero was published. That was my first like major track, quote unquote. And I remember I was in a Fry's that had just opened up, Fry's Electronics, and I was browsing around. I guess it was around the time StarCraft 2 came out, because I remember there was a lot of advertising for that. But I was like browsing the store. I don't know what turned me on to it, but they had a copy of Ableton Live, the DAW, digital audio workstation. And I don't really know why I was called to it, but I decided to splurge. It looked interesting, and I bought it on a whim. And Ableton Live is not something you buy on a whim. It's like a whole thing, but I didn't know. I didn't really know what it was, that I had gotten. But I fell in love with it instantly. I figured out, making tracks, understanding what MIDI was, and even to this day, I still don't know all what Ableton can do. It's such a massive piece of software. It's so intimidating, and I'm not smart enough or savvy enough in the music realm to be able to swiftly decipher all of its value. But that's the reason why I love it, because I'm always learning. Even all these years, more than a decade later, it's still teaching me things. And, obviously Ableton's evolved quite a bit itself. So, but anyway, yeah, at first I was just screwing around, making sounds, the innocent days, right? And then I kind of got this, the first hook in me was like with samples. I was thinking, samples are the keys to making sound. Making sounds are the key to making music. Therefore, I need all the samples I can get my hands on. And of course, I didn't know really what a sample was or what it's for. I mean, that's part of it. That's most of it. But it's so funny. But I didn't realize at the time that, like, samples came from somewhere. Almost as if samples just were out of the ether, I remember I was working at Pizza Hut. God, this was a long time ago. I was working at Pizza Hut as a delivery driver. Underrated job position, by the way. Delivery in general. But you can knock out a lot of audiobooks. I'm just saying. Anyway, by sheer fate, by coincidence, another delivery driver that worked there was also into music production. And I'll never forget, one day he looked at me dead in the eye after I told, I was venting my excitement, like, yeah, I'm working on it, I got some good samples, blah, blah, blah. He's like, have you ever considered making your own samples? I was like, oh, people do that. It's so adorable, so quaint that I didn't know this. Or I hadn't wrapped my head around it. That's how new I was at the time. And then now, even to this day, whenever I hear the word sample, to me it's equivalent to I'm lazy. It's equivalent to a sound I was too lazy to figure out how to replicate and learn how to do on my own. I've since swayed a little bit back from that extreme. And now I think instead of sample equals laziness, I think of sample equals necessary outsourcing for your sounds. So for those who don't know, when you compose electronic music, or music in general, I should have led with that. I make electronic music and I do it through Ableton as a hobby, and Ableton's where I got my start. But you wear a lot of hats. There's the music theory, like the scales and the notes and the beats and all that, and time signature and the modes and counterpoint. It's a whole thing. Then there's the drums and the beat and keeping the energy and all that. Then there's creating the sounds. You could have the most amazing notes and MIDI around, but if you match the wrong sound with it, it sounds like garbage. So you have to voice the tracks. You have to appropriately put the appropriate sounding sound to match the appropriate role it's supposed to play in the music. So that's the whole thing. Then, you have synthesis, which ties into that. Sound synthesis. This is making the kind of sounds you want. Creating brand new sounds. Maybe that nobody's ever heard before. Or maybe a classic sound that you're going for. And you can create it with you guessed it, a synthesizer. And synthesizers come in hardware and they come in software. And there's a whole debate. I don't really care. But the point is, what you can do is synthesize sounds and then sample those synthesized sounds. And that's how samples are born. Basically, a sample is just a sound you've recorded. That's the long and short of it, honestly. But, the implication of samples in the music composition area is meant to mean a high-quality, polished, synthesized sound that serves a specific purpose, like a sound effect or a raindrop or a drum hit or an 80s synth or a trap hat or whatever. But really, you can sample walking across your apartment. You can sample the wind. You can sample the birds flapping its wings, So yeah. Then there's mixing and mastering. And, that's giving sounds their own space. And I'm not spoken that's an oversimplification, but, spoken like somebody who is a newbie in mixing and mastering, and I admit I am. I only know the absolute basics. What I'm trying to say is, you wear a lot of hats. And yeah, when my friend told me like making my own samples, yeah, I got into synthesis, but then I realized there's an opportunity cost because now I'm like spending hours on one sound and I'm not making any music, you know? And that really irritated me. So I started learning music theory, and then the same thing happened. I'm like, I gotta actually, but now I have to find the appropriate sound, you know? And then when I started putting things together, I'm like, now I gotta mix these correctly to make it sound good. Yeah, it's been quite a journey, but Unknown Arcade Hero was like the first time it kind of all came together, and I spent a lot of time with the MIDI, with the sounds, you know, with my basic understanding of mixing and mastering. And yeah, that's you know, my first great track. That's like my first child. It's got a special place. So yeah, you know, and Van Gogh, I think it was he who said, you know, learn the rules so you can break them later. And I'm still on that journey of learning the rules. And, you know, I've gotten ahead of myself and went ahead and broken some and done some probably stupid things to make things sound good. But my main thing, like that I've heard and that I think is true, is above all, the music must sound good. Not everyone's a music producer, and nobody cares. You know, even I, as a music producer, I don't care. Like, oh, you didn't use the S93 compressor? Noob. What are you doing? How do you even cross the street? Like, if it sounds good, it sounds good. I don't care about any of that stuff. So, yeah, and ever since Unknown Arcade Hero, that track, I've just been kind of riffing on building my skills, trying new things. And I'll have, I'm going to link below a lot of the resources that really helped me out during my journey and are still helping me out, honestly. And I want to, talk a little bit about, I mentioned this in the About Me video, like the channel introduction video, that, like the creative process, right? I want to talk a little bit about that. So, for me, you know, Ausgrave Royalty is what I called my artist name. That's like my band or whatever. And it refers to the anthropomorphized constructs that exemplify specific aspects of my personality, be it my self-destructive tendency, my enthusiasm, my silliness, my seriousness, whatever, my quest for knowledge and wisdom. They're all personified in some sort of character in the Ausgrave Royalty lore. And just like the gods of Olympus, like the Pantheon of my gods or manifestations is called Ausgrave Royalty. And I did this at first unconsciously, but what it's really helped me tap into in terms of music is it helps me go from like zero to completed song faster. And I am obsessed with systems creating. So I'll get to this in a moment too, but yeah, they help me out of creative writer's block. Like, what kind of song am I into? Am I feeling Shalak or Terith? These are characters from Ausgrave Royalty, or maybe Ausgrave himself, or maybe some Calcius. And I can immediately get into that character, and I'm like, okay, now that I'm that character, how would he do this track? You know, so to speak. And let me unpack that a bit. So I have some notes here. There is a story from, y'all have probably heard this before, But there's a story apparently from the book Art and Fear by David Bales and Ted Orland. I'll link it below. I haven't read the book, but I searched for this story that I had heard, and I wanted to get the story correct. And this is about the creative process. So here goes. The ceramics teacher announced on opening day that he was dividing the class into 2 groups. All those on the left side of the studio, he said, would be graded solely on the quantity of work they produced. All those on the right side solely on its quality. His procedure was simple. On the final day of class, he would bring in in his bathroom scales and weigh the work of the quantity group. 50 pounds of pots rated an A, 40 pounds a B, and so on. Those being graded on quality, however, need only produce 1 pot, albeit a perfect one, to get an A. Well, came grading time, and a curious fact emerged. The works of highest quality were all produced by the group being graded for quantity. It seems that while the quantity group was busily churning out piles of work and learning from their mistakes, the quality group had sat theorizing about perfection and in the end had little more to show for their efforts than grandiose theories and a pile of dead clay. TLDR, whoever produces the most wins. I added that last part. But the way I've gone about music creation, my own creativity, is I gotta have a system. I whoever produces the most wins. So what are all the things that I can do to spit out the most tracks possible? And this has been my latest obsession with music, and I know this sounds terrible, what I'm about to say, but if I could have a button that would make a track, I would do it. But only if I spent all the time producing that button and configuring all of its inputs and outputs and developing it, programming it, and based on my particular desires and style and standard. I mean, that's the goal for me. I mean, and I could press in an RPG character creator, randomize, and it plays on the variations, but all within my standards. Now, a lot of the savvy among you will already know that there's software that's kind of like this, like the Captain plugins, and I'll link to all this below. I think there's Orb Composer, Chord Composer, and many other kind of MIDI generation tools to get something started and make that workflow way more rapid using artificial intelligence and all that. And yeah, I mean, those work really well for what they are. My only problem with them is I still feel, it sounds silly, but because I didn't design the parameters, I feel like I'm cheating a little too much. But in those plugins' defense, they're meant to produce not a full track, because they would all sound like garbage if you just left them there. They're supposed to act as a foundation. It's like a company, you're building a house. All these plugins are supposed to do is dump the raw material in an organized manner and let you build from there. So, yeah, it's not like a create song button. And there's a meme where it's how people think electronic music is made, and it says there's a button that's push for electronic music. Boop. And you get the track. And then there's how it's really made. And it shows all the crap going on in Ableton and stuff like that. That's so true. But I don't know if I may be so bold as an amateur that I am. I really think it's a crime not to pursue your particular individual system to make your particular workflow as smooth as possible, so that you can produce and iterate and learn from mistakes, just like, the pottery example there. So yeah, I just wanted to rant about that. I think I haven't made music in a while, much to my shame. If money were no object, I would be doing it, trust me. And, all my stuff, like, I haven't, like, gotten the perfect track yet, Immediately when I finish a track, I want to move on to the next idea. I've just got this infinite, energy of ideas just, like, calling to me. I got to make the next thing. And it's sort of it's a pro and a con, because I could spend more time perfecting each. Like, my main goal is to capture the initial idea, and I'm going to talk about this in a second. That's my main goal, to catch Moby Dick, but once I've caught him, I'm on to the next, and I'm not worried about, like, anything else beyond that. But I'm sure there are other people who, like, dwell, and they're like, I'm not putting this out into the public until it's perfect. And they have, like, one track, but it's amazing, and that's it, I'm sure there's, like, my counterpart is out there somewhere. As a matter of fact, I think more people are like that from what I've gathered in the industry than, like, me, who's okay with imperfection and just putting crap out there. No, I say crap. I get it to an extent that I'm happy with, that I know could use more work and polish, but that I know I only have one life to live. YOLO, and I gotta move on to the next thing, And they say, my thing is, like, perfect is the enemy of the good. I that resonates a lot with me. So yeah, about like actually creating the track when I'm in it. How does that go? Well, I see it as, and bear with me for this analogy here, but it's like I'm sitting there and I'm thinking of a track, and all of a sudden I get an idea of something I want to do. It's nonverbal. It's more of like it's an instinct. It's an energy. And I liken it to being a detective, and suddenly a crime has been committed. I don't know what the crime is yet, but I've got the case, and I know something is afoot. And now that I know, I kind of get the file, and I'm like, okay, I know I've seen this kind of crime before. So when the detective, right when he receives the mystery, technically everyone in the world is a suspect, right? There are no limitations on the suspect. But then you review the basic facts of the case. Let's say I'm going for upbeat, optimistic, hopeful. Okay, now you've ruled out a lot. You've ruled out like 90%, 95% of the world's population. Like, no dark, deep witch house, no crazy ecstasy revelry thing. No, this is something poppy. It's 4/4 time signature. So you set immediately, when you figure out what you're kind of going for, all these limitations suddenly fall in place, and you now have an idea. Oh, I know that the pop songs hang out at the Whirling in Rags. If you get that reference, you're a real one, by the way. But yeah, so I'll go there, and that narrows your focus down as a detective, and that puts you one step closer to solving the mystery. Even if it doesn't pan out, the mystery is now in motion. So now you have an idea of where you're going, and when you get to the Whirling in Rags, maybe you get a lead. maybe the suspect is male. Okay, you've just set another limitation. This could be, I have the basic drum beat. And what this does is it means that you can't, in music, in composing, in this, you can't just make every sound and turn the volume up all the way. It makes no sense. It would just be a wall of noise. The genius and the creative part is creating the space for each sound to have its fullness in. And this reminds me of a quote. I don't know who said it, but like, I think it was like Michelangelo with like the statue David. And he was talking about like, I didn't really sculpt it. I just removed everything until it was sculpted, I removed what was unnecessary. And that's sort of like music, like what I'm trying to say. It's not really about what you're adding. It's more about what's not there, what you choose to restrict yourself from. So like, let's say you have a drum beat. Now you have to play around the drum beat, right? So that now you're one step closer to a completed track, aka solving the mystery. Maybe next you're like, okay, well, men who go to the Whirling in Rags also go here. Let's see here. So maybe you find the next clue. That's kind of like your bass line. And your bass line will work with your drum beat. So now you've got a drum and bass. Well, now you have all these restrictions. You can't just have another bass line, like, on top of that will conflict. So you have to work around it, And that's good news. That's not bad news. Constraints are freeing. You want limitations. They are going to help you solve the mystery. As a matter of fact, spoiler alert, how does a detective eventually catch the suspect? They've eliminated and reduced all the possibilities. The suspect they find, the criminal, is the one with the most amount of limitations, where each fact, each clue of the case has been stacked on each other in a harmonious way that only leads to one result, aka the criminal, aka the solving of the mystery, aka a well-produced track. That's what every detective / music composer, at least from my perspective, my paradigm, is going for. And yeah, then you find like the melody, then you find like the pad, then you find like the arpeggiator, the arpeggio. Then you play with effects, you question leads, musical pun there. Yeah, and it all layers on one another. And that's how I see the process, the creative process. And you want limitations. And yes, I'm being on the nose. It's a life metaphor. That what I've learned from music composition this is the gem that I've got from it, from my struggle, from my process of this. And that was really abstract and probably will appeal to only a few of you, but I hope y'all got value out of it. I'm going to conclude the video. Again, I'm going to share some links to resources that really helped me in my journey, and hopefully it'll help you. And if you haven't tried music composition, maybe download Ableton. There's a free trial. Give it a go. Again, I always say, like, I just send the flare up. And there are great ideas and great things you can get exposed to in this process of creating music. I would encourage everyone to do it. I'll leave it there. And with that, I'll say bye-bye, and thanks for stopping in, and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.